Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Laposata, curator of A Pound of Whatever Silver He Pleases and 2019-2020 collections assistant with the University of Richmond Museums, here today to present my exhibition on the history and economy in the late medieval Eastern Mediterranean, told through the coinage of the period. As my introduction says, this exhibition examines 53 unique coins from the 13th and 14th century Eastern Mediterranean world in order to uncover the history of this period and place at a very important time, really to examine the interconnectedness of the medieval world and to understand what was important to the rulers of this particular place and time. So really the point of this video is twofold. First of all, we're going to learn how to analyze a coin. We're going to understand the differences between an obverse and a reverse, understand how I set up these slides, really to ensure that we get as much as we can from the coins that were shown in this exhibition. Furthermore, I'm then going to be moving on to what's at stake. What are some of the conclusions that we can draw from examining coinage, not only for the medieval world in general, but also looking ahead to how coins can be used in historical thought and in historical analysis more generally. And so with that, let's jump into a coin. Now, first, we're going to start with kind of a European or Christian example of coinage, because this actually differs pretty distinctly from the Muslim mode of coinage. And so we'll look here first is just sort of understand what's going on. First, let's look at how I set up these slides, just so that we all make sure we know what we're looking at. So first and foremost, we have the basic tombstone information at the bottom of the slide. This is really just trying to get the basics down of the coin. So first we have ducato. Now the ducato is the type of coin itself. We next move on to Andrea Dandolo, who is the ruler of the coin, followed by the dates of his reign. It's hard sometimes to pinpoint exactly when a coin was made, particularly if there isn't a particular variant, but because of that, I'm going to give the span of this reign so we can ground it temporally in period. Next, we move on to the medium of the coin. Is it gold? Is it bullion? Is it silver? And we can figure that out through this sort of medium here. Next, we have the weight and then the dimensions of the coin itself. And these are all, particularly important in trying to compare coinage from different places and also just to have a basic understanding of when we're talking about and who we're talking about. Now, next you can see down at the bottom that I give actually a pretty lengthy description of what's going on this coin. Now, this doesn't happen for every coin, but for the particularly important ones, I certainly do go to some lengths to describe what's going on so that we can all trace a little bit of what's going on and have a better idea of what this coinage is saying. But even without my legends here, even without my descriptions, we can figure out a little bit about what's going on in these coins just by looking at them. And so with that, I'm going to dive in a little bit about how we can read European coinage from this period. And so first and foremost, we need to understand what is an obverse and what is a reverse. What is an O and what is an R? So the obverse is pretty straightforward. It is the front of the coin. It's just the term that we use for the front. The reverse obviously meaning the back. And for European coinage, in particular, these have special meanings. So the obverse of the coin is generally speaking going to be associated with the ruler, while the reverse of the coin, generally speaking, is going to have some sort of religious significance. And so let's take a look first at the obverse of this ducato from Andrea Dandolo. So again, I said this has something to do with the ruler, and we can see that straight away when we actually look at the image that is projected onto the coin. So European coins in particular generally have some sort of symbol, whether that be the image of a person itself or a cross or some sort of other symbol that's going to go on. They like putting that on the coin itself, both on the front and the back. And so we can see that being tied directly to the ruler. Here we have Andrea Dandolo, who is kneeling, and next to him, standing above him, is St. Mark, the patron saint of Venice, who is giving him a flag with ducks on it, or duke, basically giving him the right to rule. So immediately we see that there is some sort of justification of Andrea Dandolo's reign, and we see that he himself is being depicted on this coin. Obviously, rulership is very important, but we get that even more when we look at the legend that's going around the margins of the coin. What is itself written? And it basically is pointing out who these characters on the coin are. On the right side of the coin, you see Andrea Dandolo, or an abbreviated version of Andrea Dandolo. And then on the left side, you have an abbreviated Saint Mark of Venice, basically pointing out who these characters are. So not only do we know the ruler, but we see that the power and the legitimacy of this ruler is coming from this important religious figure from Venice. Now, moving on to the back. Again, we're dealing primarily with religious symbolism here, and that is striking us right in the face when we look at this coin and we see the image of Jesus Christ himself staring back at us. So obviously, the symbolism is apparent. Jesus Christ is involved in this coin. The Venetian rulers want to show just how important Christianity is to their rule. But that is again reinforced in the legend of the coin itself. We see in abbreviated Latin basically a justification for their rule, why they are allowed to rule from Venice over their territories and so on and so forth. And it's because they are particularly tied to Christendom and to the kingdom of God itself, right, through Christ. This sort of religious symbology is going to occur on a lot of European coinage. And so for that reason, we see that in European coinage, generally speaking, the obverse has something to do with the ruler, and the reverse has something to do with religious symbolism. Make sure to note whenever you're looking at a European coin from this period to take note of the particular symbols, the particular imagery, as well as the legends. I've tried to give a description of what's going on and what all of it means, and I hope you can draw some conclusions based on all of that. But Muslim coinage is actually pretty different from European coinage in that it doesn't really have a lot of images. Because of the nature of Islam, they are particularly against iconography. And for that reason, you don't see a lot of images in Muslim coinage. Instead, you have geometric patterns like the ones that we're seeing here. So again, just going over the basics, we see again the basic tombstone information. We know that this is a 2 dirham coin. We know it is from Mahmud Razan, who ruled from 1295 to 1304. We know this is a silver coin, and we know its weight and its dimensions. So then again, we go into exactly what's going on the obverse and reverse. And so everything that I just said about European coinage is actually flipped when it comes to Muslim coinage. Generally speaking, the allusions to God, the religious symbolism, is going to be happening on the obverse of the coin, while the reverse of the coin is generally speaking where you're going to see this allusion to the ruler, this right to rule, the titles, so on and so forth. And so here for this particular one, we see a 5-petal flower, again, this sort of geometric shape, and inside of which is the Shahada, which is a statement of the Islamic faith, basically saying that there is no God except for Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. It's a basic statement of faith, but it's a particularly important one. This is the ruler of the Ilkhanate himself saying that we are a Muslim nation, that we revere Allah, and that it's a particularly important thing in our society. That is on the obverse of the coin. That's what you're seeing when you first see the coin. Now, moving on to the reverse of the coin, we actually see the title of the Ilkhan, the title of Mahmud Razan, in several different scripts. And this is important in just sort of generally understanding the breadth of the Ilkhanate, how far of a span it ruled in terms of geographic distance. But again, we're seeing the allusion to the ruler here. We might not have an image itself, but we have the title over and over again in various different scripts, cementing to the people of the realm that this is our ruler. So that's an important thing to understand when we're talking about Muslim coinage. So again, everything is flipped from European coinage. The obverse is the one dealing with the religious symbolism, while the reverse is the one dealing with the ruler and the reign itself. Now, what are the stakes of all of this? Why do we care to look at coinage? Well, for the medieval world in particular, coins are fascinating because they actually give us a lot of information from which to work. The medieval period was ultimately one of connection, and we see that through the coins. This is connection not only across economic lines, right, but across political, cultural, and religious lines as well. These are groups that are inherently different from one another for a lot of different reasons, and yet they still interact with one another. This cloistered off view of the Middle Ages, particularly in the Eastern Mediterranean, needs to go away because, as we see in the coinage that I examine in this exhibition, connection was abundant throughout this period across a number of different lines. Furthermore, coins are useful because they tell us what's going on with the political elite in any given polity. Coinage was used by these political elites for a number of reasons, but we really see power projection, economic control, and the expression of culturally important images to be some of the most important reasons for why these rulers are putting what they do on coinage. They want to express their power. They want to control their economy, and they want to show the world and their realm what is important. Generally speaking, that's something to do with religion. And so these are all really important things in understanding both how the minds of the elites in the period operate, what they deemed to be important, not only for themselves, but for the world that they were ruling and the world that they were interacting with. And then also showing that this is a world of interaction and that coinage itself can display that sort of interaction. But these sorts of lessons aren't only necessary for the medieval world. In fact, we can learn a lot from coins itself in history. And coinage is often an overlooked method of serious historical interpretation when it comes down to it. As a history major myself, it's not so easy to often come across serious economic data, and coinage factors in even less oftentimes. And so coinage can be particularly useful. It can add new narratives to help us figure out the complex problems of the past. It can give historians economic data from which to work, which is particularly important the further back we go in time. And then it also has value for its contribution to art. And the values and the way power was projected in the past. As we just saw, it has some particular effects, and it has some particular understanding of the way that medieval rulers thought. This can be applied throughout time. And so by looking at coinage as a serious method of historical analysis, we can better understand what's going on in a period, from its economy to the way its rulers thought to the ways that particular regions were connected. And so with that, I'd just like to say thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you stick around and enjoy the rest of my exhibition. This was a great deal of work and something that I've really spent the last 3 years putting together as sort of the capstone of my experience at the University of Richmond Museums. And so I'd just like to say once again, thank you, and please enjoy.